I was traveling for business. I do it often. I stay in the same hotel every time. It's a great little place. Perfect for me anyway. I had to run a few errands before checking in, so I arrived a little bit later than normal. It was raining, really hammering it down. I got soaked through as I ran from my car to the lobby. I didn't bring an umbrella or a coat. God. I was glad I already grabbed some dinner, so I went straight to the room. I filled the tub up and had a bath, and jumped into bed. I was shattered. Thunder and lightning woke me. It was so loud. I rolled over in bed and something caught my eye. A shadow. At the window. I wanted to get up and see if someone was there, but I couldn't move. It was like sleep paralysis or something. Whenever lightning flashed, I saw the shadow at the window. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare in horror. With a crack of thunder, suddenly the shadow was gone, and I was able to move again. I went to the window. There was no one there. The lightning had stopped. There was no moonlight, so I couldn't see anything. I got back into bed and went to sleep. What else could I have done? The next morning at breakfast, I spoke to a hotel employee and told him what happened. I told him that there was some figure, shadow, silhouette, whatever. This thing was peering at me through the window. The employee asked me what room I was staying in, and then when I told him, he said that my story couldn't possibly be true. I asked him what he meant, and he said, "There's no corridor where your room's window is. If someone was there, they must have been 10 foot tall." I was dumbstruck, a bit annoyed with his cocky answer. He offered to prove it to me, so off we went to take a look. Yep, we used to have stairs there, but they collapsed. They were warded off from the public. It was so dilapidated, there was a gaping hole in the middle of them. Yeah, he was right. There was nowhere for anyone to stand near my window. A hotel employee couldn't believe it. He even looked a bit shaken up by it. He said no one else had said anything about that room, or a shadow peering at them while they slept. This happened when 4 friends and I were camping one night. A typhoon was approaching Japan. Earlier in the day, the weather forecast had stated that it wasn't on course to where we were camping, but over the course of the day, it had changed direction and we were forced to check into a guest house. The rain wouldn't have been too much of a problem, but our tents wouldn't be able to withstand the strong typhoon winds. We found a guest house. The building was beautiful. We were welcomed in by the cheerful owners. It was great. They guided us to our room. It was opposite the hotel's banquet hall. "We don't often use this room, but it might get a little bit noisy tonight," the owner said in a hushed voice. "I'm sorry. I hope it doesn't ruin your stay with us." My friends and I went into our room, settled down. We ate and drank some of the food and alcohol we packed with us. We could hear some noise from next door. The party in the banquet hall never got as loud as we were led to believe that it might. I had decided to take a look around the guest house, since it looked like a really nice place. I walked past the banquet hall and noticed something. All the lights were off. I could tell by just looking under the door. I could hear voices murmuring in there. I went back to our room and told my friends about what I'd heard. They followed me and stood outside the banquet hall and listened. They could hear it too. Huh. Maybe there's ghosts in there, one of my friends said. We weren't scared, but the more we drank, the more curious we grew. Later, one of my friends decided he wanted to communicate with these ghosts. So, he left our room, stood outside the banquet hall, and asked, "Did someone die in here?" Then, something banged on the wall from inside the banquet hall. To indicate yes, we assumed. "Should we light an incense stick for you?" one of my friends asked aloud. "How many should we light? How many of you are in there?" she asked. The guest house was silent, just for a moment, and then we froze in fear. I can't remember anything after that. I guess I could blame the alcohol. I woke up in bed. I got up, ran out of the room into the hallway. The owner's wife was walking towards me in a beautiful kimono. She had a huge bundle of incense sticks in her hand. She paused and smiled and said to me, "You heard it then?" I nodded. She told me that a long time ago there was a terrible typhoon which claimed many victims in her village. We had to use the banquet hall as a makeshift morgue until help arrived, she said. Now and then, they wished to make contact with our guests. I think they must have liked you. This happened about 3 years ago, during summertime. I was riding my motorbike in the mountains of Gifu. All morning long it had been bright and sunny, and then suddenly the pitter-patter of rain started up. I came across a rest stop area and pulled in to take a break. In the service area there was a toilet and some shops. In a building with a wooden roof there was also a table and a bench. It looked like a little hut. As I was using the toilet, the rain poured down, and thunder echoed through the mountains. The rain didn't seem as if it would stop anytime soon, so I thought I'd better change into my raincoat. I took off my backpack and headed towards the sheltered hut. While I was getting my raincoat out of my bag, I put my things on the table. I casually glanced up and saw an elderly couple sat opposite me on the bench. They weren't there a second ago. When did they turn up? I didn't care that much. I was more worried about when this thunderstorm was going to stop. I stared at the sky for about 2 or 3 minutes, trying to figure out what the weather was going to do. The elderly couple that had showed up out of nowhere didn't say a word. It felt a bit uncomfortable, a little awkward, so I broke the silence. This rain started up all of a sudden, didn't it? They both stared at me, and the old man said, "It's always raining." It only just started to rain though. The hell was he talking about? I looked at the sky so I didn't have to look at him. If I don't take a quick rest, I'll never make it home, I said. The old man paused for a couple of seconds and said, "I feel sorry for the ones who don't make it home." Huh? What the hell is this? I thought. I'm out of here. I'm off. I heard some voices shouting in the distance. When I looked around, and the old couple had disappeared. But that's all I can remember. I woke. I opened my eyes. I was being shook by some guy. He looked about 30 years old or something. "Are you alright? Are you alright?" he was saying whilst he was shaking my shoulder. I asked him what was going on, or what had happened, and he said he saw me when he pulled in to use the rest area's toilet. He said I must have climbed over the railings onto the mountain path, close to the waterfall. I was stood dangerously close to a cliff edge, and he said I looked dazed and disorientated. So he jumped over to stop me from doing whatever the hell I was going to do. I have no recollection of it. I must have been unconscious for all of about 2 minutes at the most. It was raining that day. I know it was, but the guy who saved me from the cliff edge said that it hadn't rained at all that day. It must have been raining because I had my raincoat on. I looked around me. There were no puddles, no wet ground, or any sort of sign that it had been raining. I put my hands on my hips and was shocked to find that my raincoat was soaking wet. Now, there is a comment from another user in the message board when I found this story. As always, the links are in the description if you're interested. This is what his comment says. I found a similar story. Seems like the old couple showed up again. Could it be a coincidence? Take a look and compare them. Last year, 3 friends and I went motorbiking along the mountain pass of Hidatakayama. We took a break in a rest area. It looked cool, like a cabin. It was great because there was no one else around. My friend, let's call him A. He was lying down and stretching out on the bench. Me and another friend, we'll call B, was just taking in the scenery. There was a waterfall. It was beautiful. I guess we stayed there relaxing for about 30 minutes in total. Then, black clouds began to gather overhead, and it looked as if a downpour was on the cards. I quickly headed towards the sheltered hut by the bench that A was lying on. A was fast asleep. I shook him to wake him. He wouldn't wake up though. He was out like a light. The thunderstorm started. B was chatting to an old couple who had come in to take shelter. "Hello, this weather's a nightmare, isn't it?" B said. The old man replied, "Yeah, it truly is." As B and I talked, the old couple sat there in silence and just stared at A, who was still sleeping. I found them creepy, and I didn't like the way they were staring at my friend. I didn't want to look at them anymore. Thunder cracked all around us. It made me and B jump. It was loud enough to make A wake up as well. He sat up straight away and said, "Did you see their faces?" I had no idea what he meant. I looked around and noticed that the old couple were gone. B seemed confused. He ran out of the hut. He came back and said there were only our bikes in the parking area. Where the hell did the old couple go? We were in the middle of the mountains. It's impossible to get around by foot out here. It's okay. I can't feel this horrible feeling anymore. When I was sleeping, I felt something terrible. Kind of like a nightmare. I opened my eyes and they were approaching. When they sat down, I pretended to be asleep. "Oh, so you heard us talking then?" B asked. "Yeah, going on about, oh, it's a, nightmare, the weather." He said, "Yeah, it is, isn't it?" And then he said something about you as well, A said. B was shaking. He was really stressed out by that disappearance. I always pretend to be asleep when something is about to go down. But I was sending good thoughts, I promise. I was praying that we all don't get possessed, A said. This story was posted 8 years before the first one. The Hidatakayama mountain pass is located in Gifu. Therefore, both events could have occurred in the same place. This happened when I was a university student, back in 1990. I was living alone in Tokyo. Let me set the scene for you a bit. I had a nice part-time job close to a train station. I commuted to university from this station. I loved the area I was living and working in. There was one slight drawback. with my new neighborhood though. The route home from work to my apartment. If you take the normal highway road, then you have to walk uphill. It takes ages to get home this way, so usually I take a shortcut through a park. You have to walk down this narrow, winding road by the station, past a temple, to get to the entrance of the park. Along this winding road, there are concrete walls. On the left-hand side, there's a temple. On the right-hand side, there's a cemetery. After walking a couple of minutes, you come to a park. Trees surround the gates to the park. As you go in, you see a sandpit and some swings, the usual stuff. As you continue, the trees get thicker. There's an old dormitory for nurses in training on the right as well. The entrance to this dormitory cannot be accessed from the park. It's all boarded up now anyway. That building's veranda faces the park. There is a net to stop balls, frisbees and stuff like that from going in there. If you continue, you'll reach some stairs. Then there is a plaza. It ends with a forked road where you can exit the park. If you turn right, then you will find a shrine, but if you go straight, you will end up on the main road, which is quite close to my apartment. Anyway, that's the end of my little introduction. Back to the main story. This happened on a cold November night in 2003. On that day, heavy rain began to fall in the afternoon. I had classes and work that day. As soon as I finished class, the downpour began. I went to work as usual, moving through the crowd, clutching my compact umbrella. It was still raining when I finished work at midnight. Because the rain was so heavy and the winds were picking up, I thought that my little compact umbrella wouldn't last me the journey home. I decided to borrow an umbrella from work. We kept umbrellas at work for the customers, in case rain suddenly started up. They had our business address and our telephone number on it. It had a large plastic number on it too, so we knew which one had been lent out to which customer. The boss gave me the okay, and I borrowed umbrella number 7. I remember how dark and how cold it was. I was walking the winding road towards the park. The streetlights were out, so it was darker than usual. I just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. I could barely see where I was going. I was staggering against the wind and the rain. I got up the stairs to the plaza area. From the light of the public toilet, I could see a bench. The toilet is well lit, but it has a narrow entrance. Because I took this shortcut home so often, I got used to passing people in the park around this point. Since it was raining, I thought I'd never see anyone, especially at that time of night. But I was wrong. There was someone there. Someone dressed in red sat on the park bench. She was hiding her face in the crook of her elbow, and she had her knees up against her chest. She didn't have an umbrella. She was soaked. Seriously, dripping wet. I was stunned for a moment. I couldn't just walk past her and leave her there. I asked, "Are you alright?" No reply. I put the umbrella from work down on the bench beside her and said, "I have another umbrella. Please use this one." I walked off quickly. It was creepy. On the way home, I was obviously worried for the woman. I wished I had my mobile phone to contact the police or something. As soon as I thought about my mobile phone, I realized I left it at work on charge. It was Thursday. My working schedule was Monday to Thursday, so I really wanted to go back to work to get it to have it for my days off. I thought that I could check on the woman on the bench while I was at it, since I would be walking back that way to work. Only a few moments had passed since I gave her my umbrella. When I reached the bench in the park again, she was gone. I jogged through the park towards the station in an attempt to find her, but I couldn't see her anywhere. I didn't think to check the public toilet. I made it back to work and I grabbed my phone. It was freezing. I poured myself a cup of coffee and explained the umbrella situation to the manager. My manager wasn't worried about the umbrella, but found the woman very creepy. She said that only an idiot would walk that way home again. Don't be dumb Get yourself home safe, was her advice. I didn't want to worry her, so I decided not to tell the boss about the fact that she was unresponsive and she was covering her face. I headed for the exit. "Don't be an idiot," my boss called. I paused, looked back at her, and thought about the woman sat silently in the park. Past midnight, in the driving rain, in soaking wet clothes. The way she doesn't even speak to you when you speak to her. Very creepy. Leave it, I thought. So I started to walk home, but not through the park. When I got home, I dried off and dove straight into bed. Turned on my little heater. I didn't even bother turning the lights on. I could feel myself drifting off to sleep. My doorbell rang. My room's layout was a bit unusual, so as soon as you get into the apartment, you have to go up the stairs to my single room. The doorbell intercom comes with a camera, so when the doorbell rings you can check who's there without going downstairs. When I opened my bleary eyes, I saw the woman from the park on the screen. I buried my face in my hands. She must have followed me. I did move. It's strange when I think back to it. I just stared at the monitor. After about a minute or two, the monitor went back to standby. It does this if no one answers the door. She was gone. I was on the verge of tears. I didn't know what to do. I just hid beneath my covers and shivered with fear. The door handle continued to rattle. Then it fell silent for about 30 minutes or so. I began to unclench and relax a little. It carried on like this until 4 a.m. When it started getting closer to 5, I called my manager. I knew she would be leaving work around this time. Plus, she was the only one who knew about the mess I had gotten myself into that night. As the phone was ringing, I was so thankful that I decided to go back and get my phone since I didn't have a landline. The woman who I lent the umbrella to is at my house. She's trying to get in, I blubbered. I felt totally emasculated. My manager gasped. I could tell she was worried for me. I was asking her to come over and pick me up. I heard a scream outside. Then it was all over. I didn't hear anything else for the rest of the night. A week or two of terror passed by. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, but there were no other incidences. Until my manager and I were working together late one night. We heard something hit the glass windows of the shop front. There she was, soaking wet, the woman from the park. We both screamed, briefly glanced at each other, and within that moment she was gone. All she left behind was a broken umbrella in the doorway. I moved apartments pretty quickly after that, but I kept the part-time job going until I graduated from university. I still go back to my old workplace sometimes as a customer, but there's been nothing further to report. Whenever we get together and the drinks start flowing though, we always talk about that woman.